Okay, we are ready to start today, so if you have not already gotten a handout, be sure you get a handout in the back. And we are ready to go. Okay, let's open with a word of prayer. Our gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you again so much for such blessings and help and provision and care and tenderness that you've shown to us. Again, this past week, we thank you for life itself. We thank you for the privilege of living in this country where we have so many freedoms that we could even drive here this morning and be safe, that we can gather publicly and worship you both as an individual as well as a corporate body without fear of intimidation or outside influences coming and arresting us. We thank you for the freedom that we have in Jesus Christ to live out our faith. But as always, we plead for your help, that we would learn something today, not just for our head, but for our bodies, for our lifestyle, for on-the-carpet living. As always, we're so grateful for the Word of God so that we even have something to talk about that is worthwhile, because it is a book from heaven. So we plead for your help to just understand it better and then go and live it out. Again, we ask for the KBC family, as some are still on vacation, traveling, others at camp. Just for the special needs and challenges that each one faces, we ask that you will suit a special blessing to their need today and be a God of all grace to them, we ask. But again, we commit this hour to you now in Jesus' wonderful name. Amen. Okay, we are in the midst of an adult Sunday school class for July and August. 9 studies, a 9-week series on the book of Proverbs. And we took the first 2 weeks to basically lay the foundation, which is in chapters 1 through 9. And the reason we spent so much time there is because, as we said, it's very easy to come to the book of Proverbs and see 1 to 9 is almost like one book, and then 10 to 31 is almost another book of one-liners, and they just seem so disjointed. But actually, 1 to 9 is simply setting the stage for us, and then 10 to 31, all those one-liners basically elaborate on it and help us better understand the multiple illustrations of the first 9 chapters. So in those first 9 chapters, just remember, by way of quick review, the emphasis is on the 2 ways. And as you read those first chapters, you can circle, underline whatever, way, path, place I walk, all different synonymous words. And the picture that's constantly given to us is of a young person. And again, remember, this is not just a boy, even though it's always a boy that's being presented, but this is also adults. This is everybody. And you come to a fork in the road, and you have to make a choice. And there are a couple of ladies standing at that fork in the road. One of them we call Lady Wisdom. The other we call Dame Folly. And both of them are there to try and attempt to attract you to follow their way. And as we said before, even though for Dame Folly, even though the language is very sexually charged, don't just see it as sex. And as I said, don't just see it as a boy, because the point is that the way of evil looks very attractive as it's presented. It always looks very attractive, shall we say, right here at the starting point. Even as many times Lady Wisdom, who calls us to the way of truth and righteousness, many times the beginning of that path will look a little, kind of like maybe the branches are a little low. It's not the paintings on the pavement, if you will, have rubbed off a little bit, and it's like, whoa, this way just looks so much better. And that's, of course, the way the devil works, as we know. He wants sin's got to be enticing to get people to follow it. So both these ladies are standing there, and they are calling people to follow them. The one is the way of sinners, the other is the way of the righteous. And remember, we're talking about not just a destination point, life one and death the other. We are talking about the character of the people who are on that pathway. And so, as we come to chapters 10 to 31, and we start seeing these one-liners, if you will, oftentimes it is drawing a contrast between the kinds of people who are on the 2 ways. The righteous man does this, but sinners do this. The just person does this, but the unjust does this. And as we said, it doesn't mean that every time it says the righteous man does this, that a saved person always acts true to character, because even as believers, we have a tendency to blow it, even though hopefully we are on the right way. And sometimes even sinners walking this path will do a good thing and will be a blessing and maybe or a help to people, but it doesn't change the fact that their nature is still that of a sinner. Okay, but generally speaking, I think we can say, even though you probably don't read it in these terms in too many writers, the book of Proverbs is really an incredible sanctification book. When we think of sanctification, because sanctification technically is being conformed to the image of Jesus Christ, naturally we say, well, wow, Jesus doesn't come along till the New Testament, so how can you have a sanctification book in the Old Testament? Well, sanctification for an Old Testament Jew was to be more like God, to be more like deity. And so God was simply telling these people, when you make a choice and you follow Lady Wisdom, I am going to be making you more like myself. And that's going to come out very strongly here as we introduce our topic for today in just a second, okay? And so that's what the first 9 chapters are all about. And now we come to chapters basically 10 to 31 that give these one-liners that are going to flesh it out. Last week we talked about the theme of being teachable. And as we said, really that is the foundation for everything in life, because being teachable means that you, as Solomon says here at the very beginning of this book, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Remember, the fear of the Lord, we said you could almost draw an equal sign and say that's salvation. In other words, if you fear the Lord in the biblical sense, it means you are rightly related to God. So, the book starts off by saying that to be rightly related to God is the beginning steps of wisdom, and it is the right path of wisdom. And then remember, about a verse or so later, it says, but fools hate wisdom. Fools don't want to be taught. And so we talked about the importance of being teachable or unteachable, because if you're teachable, you say, oh God, I'm just a man. I don't want to get stuck with myself. I need you to direct me. An unteachable person says, I'm a man. I've got my act together. I know what to do. I can make all my decisions. Get out of my life, God. And so the book of Proverbs will show us what happens to people who follow that particular path. So being teachable or being unteachable is really the basis for everything in life. Now today we come to, and by the way, for the final 7 weeks, and each week we're dealing with a theme. So last week was be teachable. This week it is, as you see at the top of your handout, speech or words or communication. Okay? And so that's what we are going to be dealing with today as we go through Proverbs. Now remember, of course, as you read the book, you're looking for words like lips or speech or mouth, etc., because those are the keys. That's how in those days they communicated. But today we have so many electronic methods of communication. So we need to remember that all of the electronic stuff we have today to communicate really falls under the category of what we're saying today. In other words, you can't come along and say, I would never think of slandering somebody. I would never talk to somebody to their face and lie to them. I would never, and we go on and on like that. But then 3 minutes later, we're home in the quietness of our den or whatever, and we are posting things on Facebook, we're doing stuff on Instagram, and we're lying, we're slandering, we're misrepresenting, you name it. Well, you are a sinner. I didn't say that. God just said that. Okay, did you hear the divine voice? Because God says we're talking about communication, and whatever means of communication you use today, whether it is with your lips or tongue or whether it is with your fingers, this stuff applies. This is what it's all about, because this is dealing with the way we interact with other people. And if they would have had iPhones and iPads and who knows what back in those days, well, God would have had a Hebrew word for those things as well. But He simply was speaking to those people and their way of communicating. So this is, as you can see, this is an incredibly rich subject and an incredibly convicting subject, because it's dealing with what we do hundreds, if not thousands of times every single day. So, as I began thinking, well, how's the best way to deal with this, since I already talk fast and require you to listen fast, I said there's no way we can look at every verse, because there are probably 4 dozen or more verses that are very explicit just on this subject. So what I've tried to do, and I hope this can be helpful a little bit, is I've come up with about 7 different categories of things where the writer will emphasize the same thing, and then 3 chapters later another verse will emphasize the same thing, etc. So I've tried to draw it together in the categories. So down the left-hand side in the caps that are dark print there, those are going to be the categories we'll look at in just a moment, okay? And if you can think of a better way to present this, tell me afterwards, so if I ever use this material again, I can improve on it and to do it better. But I thought maybe it would be better to put it in categories instead of just going chapter by chapter and then saying, oh, and this repeats what we said last chapter. Oh, this repeats 2 chapters ago, etc. Now, what we want to do at the top of your sheet, we want to start, however, with 4 foundational verses to remind us that proper speech is so important because our speech either shows God's character or the devil's character. Okay? In other words, we are either being conformed into the image of Jesus Christ, which means our character is being more like His, or else we are walking the way over here of those who are still plugged in, if you will, to the devil. And so our character, our speech is going to naturally, our speech is naturally going to reflect who our dad is. Our speech is going to naturally reflect the power outlet that we are plugged into. So, 6:16 to 19, and we're going to be turning to a lot of verses. Sometimes on your sheet I typed out the verse, other times I just gave a reference. So I hope you'll have your Bible handy, whatever form you have, electronic, paper, etc. 6:16 to 19, and we're going to come back to this verse a couple of weeks from now when we actually have an entire week we're going to devote to that's abominable. In other words, the book of Proverbs multiple times says certain things are an abomination to God. So we're going to emphasize these verses at that time. The reason I do it today, however, is it says there are 7 things that are an abomination to God. And for the time being, when you think of that, just remember that expression means that this is something that is just incredibly despicable to God. Okay? This isn't just a little bit of dirt on your sleeve. This is incredibly despicable stuff. 7 things God hates with a passion, and 3 of them have to do with our lips. Kind of interesting, isn't it? Must tell us that there's something very, very important about our lips, our language, our communication we need to be aware of. So he says, these 6 things doth the Lord hate, yea, 7 are an abomination: a proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that deviseth wicked imaginations, feet that be swift to run to mischief, a false witness that speaketh lies, he that soweth discord among the brethren. Okay? First of all, notice a lying tongue. This is actually the same word as false witness back in Exodus 20:16, the 10 Commandments, where you remember what that commandment is: thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. You shall not have a lying tongue against your neighbor. And actually, in that particular context, the first and foremost punchline, if you will, is a judicial setting like court. But as you know, the 10 Commandments are actually just brief statements that actually have hundreds of applications or hundreds of subpoints to them. And so it's dealing with all of our speech, not just, well, I would never lie if I go to court, but I'll lie in my backyard, I'll lie at work, I'll lie at the grocery. No, it's you need to be known as a person of truth, okay? And so as I put on your sheet there a quote, truthfulness is one of the most basic building blocks of all human communication, and thus of human society as a whole. Apart from honesty, there can be no meaningful relationships and no significant progress made as a society. Okay? So we're dealing with anything that is prejudicial to the truth. That's what it means when it says don't be a lie, have a lying tongue. Anything that's prejudicial to the truth comes under that category. Secondly, a false witness who speaks lies pretty much overlaps with the previous, although maybe here his emphasis really is more a judicial setting. And number 3, somebody who sows strife or controversy or contention among brethren, because that's the opposite of unity. And as you know, God wants unity among the brethren. God doesn't want everybody doing their own thing, being their own dog, if you will. No. He wants unity around Himself. He wants us to see things in a proper way, and as we do it. Doesn't mean we're going to be carbon copies of each other and we always say all the same things, but it means that there can be a proper unity. Now, a quick aside, and I didn't put this on the sheet, but there are all kinds of sizes, shapes, colors, and degrees of lies, but they're all lies nonetheless. So on the board here, I put some of the different words that have to do with lying in its various forms. Equivocation, you speak in a way that is subject to two or more interpretations with the intent of misleading. And then if the other person says, you just lied to me, what do you say? Or I'll say myself, then what do I say? Oh, well, that's how you looked at it. Yeah, I didn't mean that. Yeah, right, dude. It's exactly what I wanted to say. I wanted to say it in such a way to mislead somebody. Falsification, to represent falsely, to change something to misrepresent. Fabrication, to invent or create or make up for the purpose of deceiving. Prevarication, to deviate from the truth. Half-truths, what we say is true as far as it goes, but we omit details. Flatteries, meant to benefit us. Language, meant to mislead, misquote, misinterpret. We do it so we can lead people to a wrong conclusion. Gossiping, we speak about others to damage their reputation. I mean, that is so important that if you do it in speech, it's called slander in the courts. If you do it in writing, it's called libel. And think of how many multi-million-dollar suits there are with so-called big-name people in the courts because of slander. And they say, well, this person slandered me. I'm going to get $100 million from them. Whoa, speech must be kind of important. And by the way, we need to be very careful here as Christians because there is such a thing as what I call Christian gossip. And we say, oh, I was just spreading it I was just telling that person as a prayer request. Give me a break. Do I look like I was born yesterday? I was born 70 years ago. We like to say, oh, pray for so-and-so who's really struggling in their marriage, and not only that, their children are gone wild, and blah, and on we go. Oh, but pray for them, by the way. Yeah, why don't you just say, we have a couple in our church, and let's just pray for them because they have needs. Okay? So we need to be very, very careful because as Christians, we have sneaky ways. We have sneaky ways of violating some of these things. And I might conclude this by saying, why do you think God is so adamant about the truth? Now think of the two ways. Think of some previous things I already said. Hint, hint. Don't have any candy bars to give today if you get the answer right, but maybe I'll have a prize afterward. I don't know. Leftover taffy from the parade. That's what we'll have, yeah. Why do you think God is so adamant about the truth? All you need to think of is one New Testament verse even. It's in the Gospel of John, and it came from the lips of Jesus when he was talking to those who opposed him. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Okay, I hadn't thought of that verse. That's a good one, but that's actually second on the... As we think of the contrast, what's another great one? In John chapter 8. You are of your father the devil. Now, why does that verse apply? And the lusts of your father you will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, etc. And he's a murderer, etc. And then it goes on to say, and he is a liar and the father of lies. So when somebody is walking this way and they are plugged into the devil, it's no wonder they lie. Why would we not expect an unsaved person to play fast and loose with the truth? That's their character. That's what springs up from within them. And Solomon's going to say that multiple times in the verses we look at today, a lot of different contexts. But likewise, if we are a person of truth, why would God expect us to be a person of truth? Because as He makes us more like Jesus Christ is truth. And so it's only natural if you are His children and you're getting your energy from Him, then you are also going to be a truth speaker. You're going to be speaking the truth. And by the way, I'm jumping ahead a good bit here, but the Bible makes it very clear in the New Testament sanctification passages especially, that when God is sanctifying somebody, when God takes somebody and makes them His child and He's leading them down this path, one of the key areas in your life He's going to work with is going to be your tongue. And we'll look at some in Ephesians, Colossians, etc., where it says, throw off the old man and that rotten language you use. That's a term for rotten grapes, for rotten fruit, rotten vegetables. Get rid of that stuff that stinks and rather speak wholesome words, healthy words, words that are ministering grace, words that build people up, etc., etc. So that's why God is so dead set. This is not just something he says, oh, Royce, I know you have a problem with your tongue. Don't worry about it. A lot of other people at KBC do too. He says this is a significant area. This is a very important area because it shows whether or not you are becoming more like me or you're claiming to walk one path, but really, every time you open your mouth, it sounds like, it smells like you're walking on the other path. Okay, so that's the first verse. Second key verse, chapter 8 and verse 13, where we read, the fear of the Lord. Okay, if a person is rightly related to God, the fear of the Lord is to hate evil, pride, and arrogancy, and the evil way, and the froward mouth. Oh, okay. This is a word for perversity or scheming. It's when you turn everything upside down from the norm, from what it should be. God says the fear of the Lord is to hate those things because he hates them. So again, you see how all this is tying in with John 8:44? If the people who follow this are the children of the devil, but people who speak truth are over here, God says, yeah, I hate people who turn the truth upside down. Now, if you're really my child, you will hate people like that. Third verse, 12:22. Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but they that deal truly are his delight. So here we have another abominable verse, something that's abominable to God. We'll come back to that in a later lesson. But the ones who do trustworthiness or honesty are his delight. And we're going to find when we come to those abomination passages how many times abomination is contrasted with delight. Is it abominable? Is it something totally despicable to God? Or is it something God delights in, he finds incredible pleasure in? And he finds incredible pleasure in honesty. And then the last one to lay the foundation, 13:5a, where we read, a righteous man hates lying. A righteous man hates words of lying, words of falsehood, words of deception. And the reason he hates it is because for a righteous man, his dad hates it. His father, his heavenly Father hates it. And so, as someone has said, what you love and what you hate reveal what you are. The things that I love in life ought to be things that God loves. The things that I hate in life ought to be things that God hates. And that is telling people what is really inside me. So, right out of the chute, we might say, we see which lady we are following. We see which path we're following, we see which character we are, we see which destination we want to head to. Okay? Comments, questions, additions, corrections, deletions, you still with me? We've got a lot to talk about, so we won't have too many down moments unless you have good questions or comments. Or I call on Wilson, I guess then we'll have a intermission. Okay, let's go on. Contrast. So I found several, and again, my illustrations here are not complete. I've just given you some representative samples under these categories, but there are many more. So contrast, and by this category, I'm simply saying that these are verses that basically just show the difference in speech between righteous people and wicked people, the wise versus the fool. And basically, this is what, in the form that we find him in, this is what we call antithetic parallelism. Remember again, as we said last week, when you study the Proverbs and when you study Hebrew poetry is not known for rhyme as generally English poetry is, okay? But it's known more for the way certain lines either contrast each other, that would be antithetic parallelism. Maybe the second line pretty much repeats the first line, that's synonymous parallelism. Maybe the second line kind of takes the first line and takes it a step in advance. That's more like synthetic parallelism, etc. So there are various kinds of ways the Hebrew writer tries to make a point. But the verses I've listed for you here by way of contrast, naturally, are the contrasts. They're antithetic parallelism to show the difference between these two ways, so that we know of a surety we're talking about two totally distinct ways. It's not just, no big deal between them. Remember what we said last time as well, and I drew this little, what do you call that, arrow, whatever it is, They're to remind us that when you start down these paths, they don't seem like they're very much apart. In other words, they seem oh so close at the fork in the road right there. But the farther you go out the fork in the road, the greater the disparity comes. And that's what we're going to see with the tongue. The more you walk down this road and the more you get in the habit of just speech that's ungodly, the easier it is for you to open your mouth and just have ungodly speech pour forth. So, chapter 10 and verse 31. The mouth of the just brings forth wisdom, but the froward tongue, the perverse tongue, the tongue that turns things upside down, shall be cut out. In other words, it shall be judged. So notice the antithetic parallelism. The mouth of the just are the righteous, and wisdom, the froward tongue, and the perversity. Okay? So we have a contrast between the two tongues and what they're doing. Chapter 10 and verse 32, the lips of the righteous know what is pleasing or acceptable, but the mouth of the wicked speaks frowardness. That's the same word again, perversity, perversion, twisted, crooked. So a righteous person knows what is acceptable to God and to man. A wicked tongue speaks what is twisted or crooked from the norm. Chapter 12 and verse 17. He that speaks truth shows forth righteousness. Okay? So the truth speaker is propagating righteousness, conformity to a standard. That standard is nothing other than the Word of God. But a false witness propagates deceit, that is treachery or fraud, deception. He doesn't want to give you that which conforms to a standard. Chapter 12 and verse 19, the lip of truth, that is the lip that speaks truth, he's speaking veracity, accuracy, reliable stuff, shall be established. In other words, what he says is accurate, so it will be established because it's true. But a lying tongue is only for a moment, or more literally, only for a twinkle. In other words, when somebody gives a lie, it's here now, and just like that, it really passes away because it's a lie. It's not going to be established. And so, as someone has said, especially in light of all these hearings going on in D.C. about all kinds of stuff, if you simply speak the truth on the stand, you don't need to remember what you said yesterday. You know how profound that is. If I get on the stand and lie today, and then tomorrow when I get on the stand and another lawyer tries to cut me, to slice and dice me, well then I'm trying to remember, what did I say yesterday, because I lied about this and I prevaricated on that and I falsified something, so wow, can't remember what I said, so maybe I ought to plead the fifth today. No, just speak the truth, and you don't need to worry about what you said yesterday, because that's the truth. 14:5, a faithful witness, that is a witness who teaches faithfulness and trustworthiness, will not lie, but a false witness will utter lies. Nothing moves the righteous one, because of his character is righteous. So a righteous person doesn't come along and say, oh, I wonder which way the culture wars are blowing today. So he licks his thumb and sticks it up to the wind to see which way the wind is blowing. No. He says, I'm a godly person. My character is truth, so I'll speak the truth. And then as the second part of the verse says, the false witness who will act according to his nature, so he will utter lies. His nature is to be deceptive. He's got to lick his finger and see which way the cultural winds are blowing, so he can make an answer that will show that he really is woke, and that what he is saying and doing is, wow, so up to date. He's on the right side of history. Although, as we know, he's really on the wrong side of history, but in his foolishness, he doesn't get it. So what a contrast in 14:5. The godly person says what he says because that's his nature. The ungodly person says what he says because that's his nature. 15:2, the tongue of the wise makes knowledge acceptable. The mouth of fools, and that is the number 3 fool. If you haven't been with us on week number 2, I gave a handout because in the book of Proverbs there are 5 different kinds of fools, going from kind of the simple, the person that God calls, shall we say, fool number 1, who has just never really been taught, but if he'd be taught, there's a good chance he'd get it, all the way down to fool number 5, the dead-set scorner against God, who basically says, God, get out of my life. Why would I need you? I have myself. Okay, well, this word for fool here is a fool number 3. It's still kind of a passive fool, but it's getting real close to entering that active category where there's not too much hope afterward. So the fool, the mouth of fools, pours out, literally it's a very picturesque expression, it belches out. It just kind of, the fool opens his mouth and it's just like lava flowing out, can't even help itself, and it flows out foolishness. But now notice on this one, as I put on your sheet, the content is not only important, but the manner of how to make truth winsome. Okay? Because it said, remember the first part of the verse, the tongue of the wise makes knowledge acceptable. So, I put a quote on your sheet. This involves prudence in when to speak, selection of words used, and the tone of the voice. Think of it this way. Have you ever known, and surely you have, or heard of someone who had the truth and actually had a good argument, but you were turned off by it because of the smart-aleck, sassy, snarkly, whatever way that they presented it? And you said, man, that is a really good argument, but if I say I agree with it, then they're going to say I'm a snarkly whatever you want to call that other person. And so the writer of Proverbs is telling us, hey, there is a right way and a wrong way to even say the truth. So make sure when you do speak the truth that you do it in a way that is winsome. It's a way that people can say, yeah, I want to accept that because it's right, but not only that, wow, it's very evident that you are a godly individual because you have a nice, kind, proper way of speaking the truth. And as you know, as I know, that takes more than a lifetime to hone that kind of skill. Doesn't come overnight, okay? But that ought to be true of us because God says that's what He's working with us to do. And then the last one I gave you, 15:7, the lips of the wise dispense knowledge, the heart of the foolish, this is also that fool number 3 on your chart, does not so. And here the heart is used for our inner being because it's kind of interesting when the first part of the verse says the lips, and then the second part says the heart of the foolish. Why doesn't it say the lips of the wise dispense knowledge, the lips of the foolish dispense foolishness? Well, the point he seems to be making is, and this is going to be made multiple times throughout, the heart is the inner recess, or to the Hebrews, this particular word was basically the inner fount for everything, your rationality, your emotional life, etc. So when it says like out of the heart a man speaks, it means out of the inner recesses of his gut, if you will, out of the inner recesses of what he is on the inside. And so it is simply saying here, when a godly person speaks, what comes forth? Knowledge, because that's what's hidden in his gut. When an ungodly person speaks, what comes forth? Foolishness, because that's what's hidden in his gut. That's what he really is as a person. So again, very, very simple verse, very, very profound. So that's contrast. Okay, category number 2 I simply call amount, and the emphasis here is that you should keep your words to a minimum. In other words, beware of chattering on and on to hear yourself speak. Remember that quote I gave you last week? I've never learned anything in life by listening to myself speak. And such is true, okay? We need to be very, very careful here. Less is more when it comes to speech. And the reason for this is because the more we rattle on, Solomon says, the easier it is to sin in some ways. And so I gave you a quote. They will promise something they can't keep. They will offend someone. They'll embarrass themselves. They'll reveal ignorance. They'll bore somebody. They'll selfishly reveal their pride by speaking on and on about their own affairs. The possibilities are endless. Yeah. And the more you simply talk and talk and talk and talk, the easier it is to sin in some way. So 10:19. And here I didn't give you all of them written out, so maybe you want to turn to them. I actually have them typed out on my sheet here, so I can quickly go through them. But in 10:19, in the multitude of words there wanteth not sin, but he that refrains his lips is wise. In other words, as has been said, it is better to keep your mouth shut and be thought a fool than to open it and remove all doubt. Okay? And that's simply what the writer of Proverbs is trying to tell us. Be very, very careful in how much you say. 13:3, he that keepeth watch, or he that watches over his mouth keeps his life. He that opens wide his lips shall have corruption or ruin. 17:27a, he that has knowledge spares or restrains his words. 17:28, even a fool, and this is a number 4 fool. So now we've passed into the category of very active fool. Even a fool, if he holds his peace, is counted wise. He that shuts his lips is esteemed a man of understanding. And the word understanding is simply one of the synonyms for wisdom. Even he that shuts his lips is thought to be a man who is wise. 29:20. Here we have another verse dealing with this constant babble or unrestrained talking. It says, do you see a man hasty in his words? There is more hope for a fool, that's the number 3 fool, than for him. So the second part of this verse is actually painting a pretty dark picture, because remember, one of the things that characterizes a fool is the way he blathers on and on and on. But it's saying right here that if you see somebody who is very quick to always be saying something before he thinks it through, there's even more hope for a fool than there is for him, which tells you, boy, that's pretty bad when a fool doesn't have much hope of speaking good words, and here's somebody who has even less possibility of speaking good words. So, again, it's a reminder, be very careful. Don't be hasty in your speech. So the solution is, the last couple of verses I gave you there, guard your mouth. 15:28, the heart of the righteous studieth to answer, but the mouth of the wicked pours out. That's this word for bubbles forth, just kind of almost like a volcano just flowing, no control. The mouth of the wicked pours out evil things. Maybe we could use a good word here. That kind of person has verbal incontinence. Okay? That's a neat phrase. I won't tell you who the editorial writer was talking about when he used it, but about a month ago I read as an editorial writer was talking about one of our major leaders today, and he said, man, this guy is just known for his verbal incontinence. And I wrote that down and I said, wow, that's exactly what Proverbs talks about. People who indeed just have no control over what they're saying. 21:23, whoso keepeth his mouth and his tongue keeps his soul from troubles, that is, from anxiety or straits. And actually in the Hebrew, this is a very compact proverb, and as writers comment, it's probably good that the writer made this so compact, because what is the proverb saying? He's saying how important it is to be compact in your speech. And so if he would have given us 6 lines to say, now when you say something, say it as compact as you can, blah, 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 blah. It's like, wait a minute, I thought you just said your speech is supposed to be compact. So he says, make your speech compact. And that's exactly what he did when he wrote this proverb. He made it a compact proverb. So, as I conclude this section, I say we need to pray what David prayed, Psalm 141:3. He said, set a watch, O Lord, before my mouth. I like this expression, keep the door of my lips. And we know what doors are like. You open them or you close them, depending on if you want something to come out, keep something in, etc. And so if we look at our mouth as kind of like a door, and we say, do I want my door to be wide open today so when I have this stream of consciousness thinking, it just automatically flows out like lava from a volcano? Or do I want to be more guarded in what I say? Do I want to keep the door shut most of the time and then think something through before I open it? And then in Psalm 39 and verse 1, David said, I will take heed to my ways, that I sin not with my tongue. I will keep my mouth with a bridle while the wicked is before me. When you think of a New Testament passage where it talks about a bridle in the same context as a tongue, James, exactly, where he says we bridle animals so we can have some control over them, etc. And yet he says nobody can bridle their tongue. Our tongue is worse or is harder to bridle than horses, than wild animals. Okay, so that's the amount. Okay, Still with me? Do you need to take a break to stand and stretch, or you're good? Okay, you're good. You're good. Okay, value. This is to remind us that proper speech is more valuable than all the things that the world values. Chapter 10 and verse 20. The tongue of the just is as choice silver, the heart of the wicked is worth little. Again, notice, if you will, the first part of the verse says the tongue of the righteous. The second part doesn't say, but the tongue of the wicked. It says the heart of the wicked. And so again, as writers generally say, he's trying to contrast or remind us that whether you are godly or ungodly, what you're going to say doesn't start with the tongue. It starts in the inner reservoir of your, I use the term gut, that's probably not good, huh? What's a good Hebrew word for gut, Phil? But you get the point I'm making. In other words, when a person speaks, it's not just, oh, that came off his tongue. Really, that came from deep within him. That's what his reservoir is like. And whether you're godly or ungodly, it started in the heart. Okay? And, of course, there's a fantastic New Testament parallel where Jesus said this same kind of thing. Can you think of a verse or verses where he said this? Where he said the same kind of principle? Matthew 12, 34b and 35. Let me read that. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. A good man out of the good treasure of the heart bringeth forth good things. An evil man out of the evil treasure bringeth forth evil things. And the word heart there is, again, not referring to our pumping organ, the heart. It's referring to that deep reservoir within from which our entire being comes forth. Chapter 20, verse 15. There is gold and a multitude of rubies or jewels. Perhaps it's coral, something we're not exactly sure exactly what kind of jewel it is, but there's gold and a multitude of jewelry. But the lips of knowledge are a precious jewel. So he's saying, yeah, the world considers certain things precious, and they are. I mean, we don't just poo-poo diamonds and say, oh, it's only a diamond. Oh, it's only coral, it's only rubies, it's only whatever. Quick aside, did you hear this week about that athlete who had, is it $650 million worth of, $650,000 of jewelry stolen from his Rolls Royce while it was parked in a Florida hotel parking lot? And it was only, I think, 7 pieces of jewelry. Good question. Why would you leave it and go in for the night, even though it was in a safe in his car, and somebody picked the lock and carried off the safe, etc.? So there are things that are valuable. We don't say they're not valuable. But he says here that the lips of knowledge are a more precious jewel. In other words, godly speech is more valuable to God than all the bling that you could possibly wear or give away. Okay? Wow. 25:11, a word fitly spoken, that is, a word spoken at the proper time in the right circumstances, is like apples of gold in pictures, that is, settings of silver or sculpturings of silver. So again, the picture it gives to us, it's not. It's a little bit confusing here. That's why some, like the New American Standard says, in pictures of silver. The NIV says in a sculpture of silver, but you get the point of what he's making. He's simply saying that a word that is spoken at the right time in just the right circumstance is just like a golden apple in this sculpture where the writer has so carefully sculpted things and then against a background of silver put somebody holding a golden apple. So as I put on your sheet, this comparison shows the loveliness of an appropriate word, the value of an appropriate word, and the careful crafting of an appropriate word. So those are some verses on value. Okay? Let's move to power, because our words are very, very powerful, either for good or for ill. 15:1, very famous verse. A soft answer, a gentle answer, a mild answer turns away wrath, but grievous, that is, hurtful words, New American Standard says harsh words, stir up anger. I put a quote on your sheet. The idea here is probably that of a conciliatory tone. We should be gentle in tone of voice, terms chosen, and nonverbal communications that accompany our speech. Do you realize there are college classes you can take and the whole class is on nonverbal communication? I mean, it lasts more than an hour that first day, okay? I mean, it's a whole 3-hour, there are whole textbooks written on just nonverbal communication, the way things that, even when we're not saying, the body posture, the face, the way we look, etc., all that communicates. So, this verse concerns not only the substance, but especially the style or manner of our words. So what he's saying here is, if you respond aright, you can put out the beginning of a big fire. Notice the word anger there. A gentle or a mild answer can turn away this wrath, this consuming fire. But at the same time, one ill-advised word can be like that little matchstick that begins a big fire. And he uses the word anger, fiery anger again at the end of the verse. Quiz time. Can you think of a New Testament passage where the mouth and fire are tied together? Besides James? Oh, you mentioned it. Okay. Yeah, James 3. Behold how behold how big a fire a little tongue can start. That little matchstick. And of course, we've had in the last 5 years, we've had so many forest fires in the West, you can't even remember all of them. But just think of how many of them started in such a very simple way, where sometimes it seems one of the major ones they thought was simply somebody going down the road and threw out a cigarette butt. Another time, somebody, of course, didn't put out a campfire. There was one charcoal left burning, and so what? That's just one little charcoal. Just one little spark. And 680,000 acres later and millions of dollars later, look at the damage that was done. And that's what the writer of Proverbs is saying. That's the way it is with your words. A good word, a properly spoken word, can diffuse a big forest fire from starting. Somebody can stomp on that charcoal, put that match out before it gets ablaze. But an ill-advised word is just like throwing a little match and saying, oh, no big deal, it's one little match. But it can burn and burn and burn. Great contrast here is to go back to 1 Samuel 25 and contrast Nabal and Abigail. You remember those, how Nabal's words to David were like pouring gasoline on fire? And David basically said, I'm going to have that guy's head. And along came Nabal's wife Abigail and spoke to David, and she was like coming to someone who was bruised, their skin was chapped, but instead of adding, instead of pouring vinegar in a wound, it was like she poured oil to heal that and kept David from going out and killing Nabal. And God eventually killed Nabal then. But yeah, what a contrast words can make in either just big explosion or calming things down and helping that cracked skin, if you will. 18:21, death and life are in the power of the tongue, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. The first line is a reminder our words can destroy or bring life. And then the second phrase shows that we reap benefits, positive or negative. So on your sheet there, I gave a quote. We will reap the benefits or endure the pains of what we say. Our words are seeds sown in the soil of other people's lives. Those words never remain neutral. They yield a harvest either to life or to death for them and for us. 25:15, by long forbearing, that's the Hebrew expression, long suffering. In other words, for somebody who shows long suffering to a prince, by long suffering is a prince or a leader persuaded, and a soft tongue will break the bone. And the picture we get here is of this determined ruler who says, I'm going to have it my way or else. This is the way it is. And instead of you coming along and saying, I'm going to shout you down and make a fool of you until I get my way, you simply come along with a soft answer. This is the same word used in chapter 15 and verse 1. A soft answer, the appropriate answer, can do so much. So you come along and you make your case, and it says what happens? you can actually break his bones and he will change his mind. And by breaking a bone doesn't mean you literally go up and kick him in the shins with your steel-spiked boot or whatever and you break his leg. No, the bone here is simply a reference to that which is hard, to that which is indeed a hardened resistance. And it's simply saying by patience and knowing how to speak and how to present your case, you can actually break down the hardened resistance of other people. Effects. These effects can be for good or ill, to build up or to destroy. And as I put on your sheet, you could compare Jeremiah's entire ministry as God gave it to him in his commission. In chapter 1, verses 9 and 10, God gave 6 phrases to him and said, I'm going to put my words in your mouth, because you said that you don't have the ability to speak, so Jeremiah, you don't need to worry. I'm going to give you the words anyhow. And my words are going to do 6 things. About 4 of them, I believe, were building terms, contractor terms. The other 2 were agricultural terms, where he said, you will destroy, you will tear down, etc. You will uproot, you will get rid of it, whatever. And the whole point he was making was to Jeremiah, my words that I'm going to give you are indeed going to be bad news for the people who hear them. But later on, after Jeremiah has ministered for decades, God came back to him and said, okay, Jeremiah, now it's time to turn your ministry around. The people are discouraged enough because the Babylonians have taken us captive. So God says, now is the time for you to build up and the time for you to plant. So he turns those images right around and says, instead of tearing down a house, we're going to build a house. Instead of pulling up like weeds, we're going to go out and we're going to plant seeds. So, another quote, what potential lies within our words? We are endowed by our Creator with the capacity to bring either genuine substantive help to those around us or to inflict incalculable lasting harm upon them. All of that by simply opening our mouths. Isn't that something that God has given us that much power? He didn't say, Royce, if you had enough money, you could wield some power. Royce, if you were smarter, you could really have some influence. Royce, no. He says, Royce, you have a mouth. Do you want to build people up and have incredible results? Or do you want to just tear people to shreds? Do you want to just slice and dice them? And you've got a mouth, you can do whichever you want to do. Wow. That's incredible power God gave to every single one of us. So 10:21, the lips of the righteous feed many. That's actually the Old Testament word for shepherding. Think of what a shepherd does. He feeds his flock, he nourishes his flock, etc. And the lips of righteous people do that to others, but fools die for lack of understanding. The point here seems to be that fools not only don't have the ability to feed others anything of substance, but they don't have anything to feed themselves. You might say they're dying from the inside because they don't have any quality words to speak that would even give them help. 12:18, there is that gossips or babbles like the piercings of a sword, but the tongue of the wise is health or is profit. Again, notice what a direct contrast. Your words can be such that it's like you walk around with a sword in your hand, you're just jabbing people and piercing them. Haven't you ever used that expression and said kind of like, whoa, what they said was like a sword in my back? Yeah, God says that's true. Your words can do that. Or God says, if you use your tongue properly, you can bring health to people. And again, just think of, this whole aspect of just physical health that we have and the importance of promoting that and how our words can promote such spiritual health. 15:4, a wholesome tongue, that's the same word, a tongue that heals, is a tree of life, but perverseness, perversity or crookedness, is a crush to the spirit. So once again, our speech can be healing or life-giving. Have there ever been times in your life when maybe you said, boy, what they just told me was like they put an elephant on my back? And you weren't talking about politics, you were talking about weight. And you're saying, man, what they said just crushed me. Or maybe you said, whew, why did they tell me that? It was like deflated my balloon. Just like somebody comes along and picks your your balloon, and the air all goes out of it, and you're just flat as a pancake, as we say. And Solomon says, yep, that's what words can do. 15:23, a man has joy by the answer of his mouth, and a word spoken in due season, how good it is. It appears here that the joy that is received is by the listener. So in other words, a man has joy, like I would get joy because somebody else says the right thing to me. And indeed, a word that's spoken in its own time, how good it really is. So I put another quote there. A wrong answer given when a correct answer is sought is misleading. A right answer given at the wrong time may be well-intentioned and technically correct, but it's damaging. The right answer at the right time is priceless. 16:23, the heart of the wise makes wise his mouth and adds learning to his lips. So here we have synthetic parallelism, where the second line just takes us a step in advance of the first. The wise man makes wise his mouth, and when he speaks, he is simply adding learning to what is coming forth. And so once again, we see this inner reservoir. This is a good cross-reference to the New Testament, Matthew 12:34 and 35. 16:24, pleasant words are as an honeycomb, sweet to the soul, and a remedy or health to the bones. Let's go to 16:27. An ungodly man, actually the term is a man of Belial, digs up evil, and in his lips there is a burning fire. The expression man of Belial basically describes somebody who's at the deepest level of depravity. And so it says that that kind of person is somebody who digs up evil. Digging up evil could be in the sense of like setting a trap. That's how the psalmist used it. Probably here the point is, like we use this expression today, I'm going to dig up evil on that person. In other words, I'm going to do a little research and find some real scuzzly stuff about them, and then I'll be able to post it on Facebook as a prayer request or whatever. Well, he's saying, no, that's what a man of Belial does. That's what somebody who is totally opposed to God, who has no restraints on him. That's what he does. And then notice it says, the whole reason his lips are as a burning fire. He wants to ruin somebody. He wants to just destroy a field, basically, shall we say, burn it over, so that nothing will grow there. It will be worthless. 16:28, a froward man, this is back to the word we saw so often, perverse, scheming, turning everything upside down. He sows strife. A whisperer, that is a slanderer or a gossip, separates very friends. And like I said, the gossip is just like junk food. Tastes good, it goes down easy, but you really can't get a healthy body on junk food. It's going to destroy you eventually. Well, gossip is just like that. It's so easy to get into it, but it has destructive effects. Boomerang. God made the system in such a way that not only our acts, but also our words have a way of coming back either to haunt us or bless us. 12, 13, and 14, the wicked is snared by the transgression of his lips. The just shall come out of trouble. A man shall be satisfied with good by the fruit of his mouth, and the recompense of a man's hands shall be rendered unto him. And then 13:2 and 18:20 do the same thing. So you can check on those. And then the last category was simply a miscellaneous category. And again, as I said, these categories are not hard and fast, so you could shuffle some of these around. But 17:4, a wicked doer gives heed to false lips. A liar will give ear or will listen to a naughty tongue. That is a tongue that is out to destroy other people. And I like the quote here from Kitchen. What we listen to says something about us. My inner character is revealed not just by what I say, but by what I willingly listen to others say. Proverbs warns us about listening to wrong influences. This proverb takes the matter a step farther. It's not simply that what I listen to may corrupt me, but it reveals the corruption already in my heart. Tabloid readers, beware. Readers of the gossip column, beware. Scandal mongers, beware. Or a quote on your handout from Kidner, the most spicy gossip has power over the listener only insofar as he is himself an evildoer and a walking falsehood, in whom the taste for carrion can overpower the love of truth. I love that expression he has. When you go about gossiping, do you stop and say, you know what, I'm just like a bird of prey looking for a dead animal on the highway so I can go and peck at it and get something from it? Pretty graphic way to describe it, huh? And then 17:7 and 25:18, you can check those out. And finally, as we conclude application, and this we could spend a whole session just on that. But number one, remember Jesus is our example. I love that Isaiah 50 passage. That's one of the servant songs. It's a Old Testament prophecy of Jesus. And it says that every morning he met with his dad. You've heard me preach on this or talk about this before. Met with his dad to say, Dad, what do you want me to say today, and what do you want me to do? Teach my tongue so I say what you want me to say. And you get to the New Testament and you find that's exactly what Matthew 12 reminds us. Jesus always had an appropriate word for an appropriate circumstance. But there was a reason for it. He met with his dad every morning and got his marching orders. Or Isaiah 53, this is in the context of the suffering servant again. Remember how it says when the suffering servant is going to be crucified, how indeed it was so malicious, and yet that suffering servant that was like a lamb going to the slaughter, who did not yell back at his captors, etc. We see that in 1 Peter 2:22 and 23, where it says, who, when Jesus was slandered as he was hanging on the cross, he didn't slander back. When he was reviled, he didn't say, if you knew who I was and what I'm going to do to you, you're going to burn, baby, burn for this. He knew how to appropriately say the right words at the right time. Wow. He's our example. The New Testament picture of an unsaved person shows how evil speech is. You can see that in Romans 3. The New Testament picture of a Christian is a mouth that is being sanctified. And I give you some references there and how much Paul talks about the new man and the change it will be for his language. But as I say, this is a daily battle, James chapter 3. And many of the themes that we just saw in the book of Proverbs are repeated in James chapter 3. When he talks about be careful, don't desire to be a teacher because you have such power and so much responsibility. Your words have such effect on others, etc., etc. And then, as I say, don't overlook numerous other OT passages on the tongue, because there are so many of them. I just listed a few that are some of my favorites here. And finally, if you need something to read on these hot summer days while you're sitting around the pool drinking iced tea and eating cheese and crackers in air-conditioned comfort, you could get to Jonathan Edwards' Resolutions and Advice to Young Converts. Jonathan Edwards was arguably the greatest theologian, philosopher America has ever produced. And when he was 19 and 20 years old, he'd already graduated graduate school from Yale, but he wrote 70 resolutions where he said, I resolve that I will do this or not do this. And it's amazing how many of those. Remember, he's still a teenager, and he's writing these 70 things that he wants to be true of his character, and so many of them deal with speech. I love the one where he says, as I talk to my mom and dad, that I will be careful by what I say, or even by the inflection I give to my voice, I don't show disrespect to them. Wow. So those resolutions are great, and that when you come to the end, he says, resolve that I will continually read these the rest of my life. And then another one, Tony Reinke has written 3 really good books dealing with our technological age, but generally in all of them is woven in the importance of speech, since technology is so tied in with communication. And you can read those books as well if you need something to do on a hot summer day. Okay, time is up for today. Questions, conclusions, concluding statements, additions, deletions. Okay, the Lord bless you. Enjoy some fellowship, and in 27 minutes, 14 seconds, be back in here for the start of the service.